what I said about the card?
What do you mean the card?
Okay, so she asked the question, can you use the card or not? So when I looked up how the card works, though there's no battery in your credit card slash the bus and train card, when you connect it to the scanner that logs you in for a ride and charges you, it is like a mini computer, and it gets its power from the scanner, and then it knows what to do. Okay, so just out of curious, whatever, that's a mini like device that gets powered. So I asked my son, and he says I would never take either of them. To like, they do have electrical inside of it that gets powered when you use it. So he just says he would never carry it throughout the
Okay.
day.
Okay, Shikoach. So I suppose I wanted to before we continue forward, I had a conversation with my friend Harav Dovi Shachat, who's the Murda Asra of Surfside, Florida, outside of Miami, and we discussed the question that Rebecca you asked with regard to the credit cards and these pods that Aaron was just talking about, the electronic. Now, as far as Muktzeh goes, he says they're Muktzeh, and possibly you could say Chasaron Kis, which would mean that you don't use them also because you don't want them to be damaged because there's something you want to keep in good condition. As far as carrying goes, so the only way you could carry it, even in an Erev, because of it being muksa, would be in a non-typical way. So putting in your pocket or your breast pocket or your pants pocket or pocketbook, etc., which is the typical way you would carry something, would not be allowed. But if you were to put it in a non-regular way of carrying, like your sock or a shoe, something in that manner. So then it's not a typical way of carrying. So as far as the handling of the muksa, so that would be okay. So if you're, and again, you'd have to put it in your possession before Shabbos, in its place before Shabbos, in its shoe before Shabbos, because you're not allowed to prepare on Shabbos and it's muksa. But as far as carrying it with an Erev for Motzei Shabbos, if it's in a non-regular way, you could do it. And same thing would possibly most probably apply to those little pods that are on the keychain. They're electronic, like Aaron says, and they should be removed, and they're muksa. That's number one. Number two is if I remember correctly, now I'm not as sharp. I should have maybe talked about it last Saturday night. If I remember correctly, in our discussion on Shabbos, I saw him on Shabbos and Shul. So in our discussion on Shabbos about a place that there is no Erev, and then it's a question of carrying it klach riyad. So you're actually carrying it dal damas klach riyad. I believe that he said that that's not allowed. If I remember correctly, to carry klach riyad is not allowed. I'm gonna have to ask him again. If I remember correctly, he said that we should not carry it if it is no Erev. So in the place like Manhattan where there's an Erev, to take the card in a non-typical way of carrying is allowed. All right, Rebecca, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much. It does.
All right, now we're holding law number 9. Kashem she'asr al taltas hamuksa oyes hanoiled, kach asr liting kli tachten kdei shiblu tocho. Now, more about this is going to be in next chapter, but he says, just like you're not allowed to carry something that's muksa, that's been set aside, or something that's come into being, newly formed, noiled, so too, you're not allowed to put a receptacle underneath them, so they should fall into it. Why? So kivan sha'idei zeh hu mevatel es hakli shlayuchel letat loid, because you're causing, by placing it there with the 100% intention for it to fall into it, you're making that once it falls into it, the vessel no longer could be carried because it's a basis of davar aser. It's holding something that is muksa. So you're causing something that up until that point was permitted to move on Shabbos, and now it's prohibited because it has the muksa. So you're not allowed to place something underneath to catch it, so and should fall into it, because then you're turning that receptacle that it falls into something that's forbidden to move on Shabbos. And in so to say, in a spiritual sense, it's almost as if you cemented them together to make it one. And now the muktzeh and the thing that it's in is one. You now do that on Shabbos. He says over here. He says, yeah, as if you cemented it there. And we'll see chapters. He says, see above chapter 75. But let's say you're an owner of pigeons or young birds, chicks, and they need to get into their chicken hen pen. So you could place, like, let's say, little things that they would climb up and down, so they could get into their chicken pen. Because once they leave, you could carry it, just to create like a step system. So though you're not allowed to carry animals on Shabbos, but here it's just going up and down. Once it goes up, it's up, it's off. So then once it leaves, you can carry it. But if you have a basket or what have you that a chicken was on as Shabbos came in, Bein Hashmashos means is the time crossing over from Friday into Shabbos. So at that moment when Shabbos comes in, this basket is a basis. It's holding something that's muktzeh, which is the animal. So then you're no longer allowed to carry it, because going into Shabbos is how it remains. And we learned that, though. How something goes into Shabbos, that sets the tone. So because in that case the chicken was on the basket, so it went into Shabbos as being something that's prohibited to move on Shabbos. Okay, so that's not really connected to the first statement. It's just a follow-up to the statement, meaning the first statement was that you're allowed to place the basket so the chickens could climb up it, because they're going to go on and go off. That's not a problem. And once he mentions that, he mentions, by the way, if the chicken is on there on Shabbos, as Shabbos comes in, then it becomes something because it was given a status as something unmovable as Shabbos came in. Okay, let's see footnote number 46. It makes the vessel useless. This is somewhat similar to wrecking or demolishing, meaning you're demolishing its use. It's no longer it's usable because now it's holding the muktzeh, which is forbidden on Shabbos. So he's saying, what's the reason? The reason is what's wrong with making, so what? What's the big deal? What's wrong if I put a vessel underneath something muktzeh, and now the muktzeh is inside? Who cares? So it's like you're demolishing it, because you're demolishing its potential use. Although you're not ruining it, and after Shabbos you could take out the muktzeh and it's still usable, you haven't destroyed the actual vessel. But halachically it's considered as if you destroy the vessel. All right, 47. Because it's no longer on it, you could place the basket for the chickens to go up and down. And even when they are on it, you can chase them off. So says the Alter Rebbe. Means, let's say they're on it and you want to move the basket, so you could chase the chickens off. It's okay, because going into Shabbos there was no chickens on it, and therefore now that they're on it, you can't move it while they're on it. Once they leave, it's okay. What happens if the basket has the chicken on it crossing over from twilight? Again, Bein Hashmashos is the uncertain time, right? Kind of, it's part night and part day, meaning to say it could be it's Friday and it could be it's Shabbos. It's kind of going into that moment. So that's when Friday crosses into Shabbos. And the basket is made for that purpose, or the chicks were put there intentionally. Now, okay, so here he says two conditions for this law. This law that he says that if the chicken is on it as twilight comes in, then the vessel is no longer usable on Shabbos, is only in one and two cases according to the Magen Avram, which is that it is a basket that's typically used for the chickens, or you put it there intentionally. But just because a chicken is on a basket that's never used as twilight, that doesn't make it a receptacle for davar aser that it crosses over. So if you have an animal that's forbidden to touch, again, we're not going into the question of pets, if you're allowed to touch the pets and what pets are allowed to be touched and not touched. But here we're talking about chicks that are, that you have in your backyard, for eggs or what have you. So that's not a pet. You're not allowed to touch them on Shabbos. So just because they jumped on something on Shabbos, and as let's say they're on your I don't know, something in your backyard, right? So today it's common to have chickens in your backyard. So let's say it's on something in your backyard, happens to be on there as twilight goes into Friday night into Shabbos. So that's not, and it's not a designated article for the chicken, and you didn't place it there intentionally. That doesn't make it unusable. Okay, that's the Magen Avraham teaches us. Let's continue. Law number 10. Now, law number 10 is kind of a law that's more connected to when they had dirt floors. So he says, "Offer v'chol hatzaver bezavis bechotzer oibebayis," but it could be applied anytime. If you have sand or earth that is heaped in a corner of your yard or your house, so it's positioned there, obviously, by being in a heap. So mutal taltlo, you can move it on Shabbos if you need to. Why? Because it's obviously put in that way, so you should have use for it. The kivan ditzvarai zu who has manasil tashmish. By making a heap with the earth or the sand, that is, so to say, your intention of making it usable, because that's why you've created the heap. If it's just scattered on your floor, then it's like part of your ground. And therefore it's something that's not usable on Shabbos, it should not be touched on Shabbos. We're going to see the footnotes whether this is applicable in all times or just in times when they had the floor of the house was earth. Let's say you rip off a branch from a tree on Shabbos before Shabbos. To either to be to use as a fan or as a fly swapper. Obviously, you're not allowed to swap flies on Shabbos because that's not allowed. But to kind of, move away the flies, so you turned it into a keli, so to say. You turned it into something that you want to usable. Or whatever else you took it off for. So more to the Shabbos, that too. So a person may think that if a person has a branch for whatever reason and you have some sort of use for it in your house, you can't say, "Oh, it's a branch, it smokes." It's not muktzeh. If you have a use for it, then it becomes like anything else. It's a utensil. You made it, you designated it for a certain use, and you basically turned it into a kind of vessel. Those days they used to have very rough, they still have them in certain places, very rough brooms. So the brooms are made of twigs. So to pull a twig out of a broom on Shabbos, the broom itself those days were also forbidden, because the brooms, they would make holes in the earth if you have an earth floor. We're not talking about today's brooms that you just sweep the dirt. We're talking about if you have earth floor and you have the rough, like rake. A rake is used to make holes in the ground. But here we're talking about if you have and if you still go to China, I've seen it before, you go to China, you have these kind of brooms that are made of twigs, hard twigs. So if you have, you can't pull a twig from these brooms on Shabbos, right? The whole broom is muktzeh. Even if a non-Jew were to pull out a twig and you have a use for it, but they pulled it out on Shabbos, it's forbidden for you to touch on Shabbos. Okay, let's see the footnotes on this, because it kind of crosses over into some things that are maybe less applicable to nowadays. So if you have it in the yard, but you must take care not to form a hole in the process. So the Mishnah Berurah says you have to be careful. If you make a heap, you can't create a hole in the heap, because that's a guma. To make a guma on Shabbos is also forbidden. So yeah, in your handling it, you have to be careful, but that concern doesn't make it prohibited for you to touch the heap of sand or dirt. In footnote number 50, he says, but if it's scattered, it's considered as part of the ground. See Beer Halacha 308, 338 for a discussion as to whether this applies only to dirt floors. Meaning, if you have scattered dirt on your floor that's marble or granite or what have you, or wood, does it mean that's part of the floor and therefore it's muktzeh or not? So he says the Beer Halacha discusses this question, if this only applies on dirt floors or not. I mean, obviously, if you're in your house has dirt, someone brings mud in or dirt into the house, you're allowed to sweep it up. That's because today we have regular floors. Okay. Footnote number 51, is that with us now? No, that's next law. Okay. What about, again, one of the mistakes that people make with muktzeh is that one of the mistakes that it makes with muktzeh is that people think that everything is muktzeh. Now that's a good thing in a way because you have to be careful what you handle, but that's not the case. Not everything is muktzeh. So he says now an example, law number 11. Nisarim shall ba'abatim she'enim einim l'schayrim mutal taltala. If you have wooden boards belonging to a household, meaning it's not for sale, so they're allowed to be moved on Shabbos, even though they're not a receptacle, they're a board. So v'shal uman, but if it's for a carpenter, it's also. So if let's say you wanted to, okay, then there's another question if you're making an oil. But let's say for whatever reason you wanted to move a board or use a board, you could use it on Shabbos. There's a question that we have to get to. I'm not sure if we discussed it yet. For instance, could you, if someone has, those like A-frame pieces of wood and you want to place a board on top of it, that's allowed on Shabbos. That's considered an oil. But I'm talking about as far as the muktzeh component is concerned. Oil means like a tent. You're making it your tent. You're creating a tent. If you put up, if you have movable legs and you put a board on top, so you're creating a tent. But that's another question. But if you have a board that you want to use for something, whatever that use would be. So if it's a private home, it's obviously not a problem. If it's even a carpenter, which would use it only as part of their work, so then it would be prohibited. But if you had intention to use it on Shabbos, then it's okay. All right, footnote number 51. He goes to Shulchan Aruch. Now we come into the question of how do we handle muktzeh? What is forbidden when it comes to muktzeh? When something is set aside, again, muktzeh means something that's set aside. What does it mean? Something is muktzeh on Shabbos. What can't you do? How far does it go? So it says, call muktzeh, anything that's muktzeh. Any aser el betiltel. Only you can't carry it. Can't be handled. Alva benigia ba'oma. She'enim menadin le'shari. But to touch it in a way that it won't move, that's okay. To touch something muktzeh is not forbidden. If you have a candelabra that's sturdy, that's strong, to touch it is not a problem. Even if while it's lit, because it's not going to move. You're allowed to touch muktzeh. If something was on top of muktzeh, you're allowed to remove it. He says, however, it's prohibited to touch a menorah tluya, a hanging candelabra, like they have, a hanging chandelier, which is hanging on a chain. Why? Because by touching it, you will move it. But if you touch something that is sturdy and won't move, it's not a problem. And also, this that we said in the previous law, that you're not allowed to place something to receive muktzeh. Now that the muktzeh's the non-muktzeh keli is becoming unusable because it's holding muktzeh, that doesn't apply to covering muktzeh. Obviously, something that's not muktzeh that you could carry, you could cover something that's muktzeh. If you don't want the rain to damage it, etc. So let's see the footnotes, but I assume the same thing would apply to if you have, let's say, left your phone somewhere, you could cover it. Nothing's wrong with it. As long as by covering it, you won't set off the lights. Okay. So here's 52. But touching muktzeh without moving it is permitted. Footnote number 52. However, when in the process of acting on behalf of the muktzeh, such as covering it, some, meaning the Taz, Magen Avram, prohibit even touching the muktzeh. Others, the Gra and Derech HaChaim, permitted. So he says that when is it prohibited? According to the Taz, we learned about the Taz in our stories, and the Magen Avram, that are commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, they say that if you're going to be touching the muktzeh for the sake of the muktzeh, then you're, like for instance, covering it, so then you're not allowed to touch it. But if you're just touching the muktzeh for no reason, that's okay. However, the Gra disagrees. The Gaon of Vilna and the Derech Chaim disagree with the Taz, and they say that it's permitted even if you're going to be touching the muktzeh, like covering it for the sake of the muktzeh itself. Okay, 53 is talking about an object that may be handled which is lying on top of muktzeh. So if there's something that's on top of a muktzeh thing, you're allowed to remove it. even if as a result the muktzeh object moves, because muktzeh may be moved indirectly when it is done for the purpose of something that is not muktzeh. So even let's say a person can say, okay, can I move this muktzeh that's on? Can I move this permissible thing that's on top of muktzeh? But I know that possibly when I move it, when I take it off, it's going to cause the muktzeh thing to move. And we said before, you're not allowed to move muktzeh. So when are you not allowed to move muktzeh, touch muktzeh, if you're touching muktzeh for the sake of the muktzeh, or just touching the muktzeh plain without any separate intention? But here, you're actually picking up something that's permissible. It happens to be when you pick up the permissible, you're also moving the muktzeh. So that's indirectly. So may be moved indirectly when it's done for the purpose of something that is not muktzeh. So says the Pri Megadim Shulchan Aruch Rav and the Mishnah Berurah 308 and Shulchan Aruch 311.8. Okay. So footnote, that covers footnote number 53. We continue in the laws. Tiltul kla'achar yad, to handle, and this is what we're talking about, holding the credit card or the business card in your soccer shoe, right? Tiltul kla'achar yad mutar b'muktzeh. If you handle it in an unusual manner, putting it in your pocket is not an unusual manner. That is the usual manner. That's where you keep a credit card. But tiltul kla'achar yad, if you're moving something that's not typical way of moving it, it's permissible with muktzeh. Let's say you have forgotten something of muktzeh on something that's permissible, and you want to use it. Or you didn't forget it there, but it fell there on Shabbos. Let's say you need the permissible, or the space where the muktzeh article is. You could remove the muktzeh, not in a typical way. It's called kla'achar yad, like with the back of your hand or your foot, or to carry the permissible thing and to shake off the muktzeh article. Let's say you wake up in the morning or Friday night and Shabbos comes in, right, and you realize you left money in your pocket and you'd like to wear the pants, right? So you are and you need the pants. So then you could shake out your pants and the money falls out. But to do it just for the sake of the muktzeh itself, not for that you need the permissible article, also it's prohibited. And if you put it there intentionally, and this is back to the question, I have to explore a little bit further the question of the credit card, because based on what we've learned here, it's not so simple. Because based on what we're saying here, is if you can't place it there, once you place it there for the muktzeh's sake, it's not permissible to move. And same thing over here. It's if you put it there before Shabbos with intention of it being there, then the kli becomes a davar aser, becomes a basis. Hold on, Aaron. Becomes a basis, a support of something that's prohibited. And it will be explained in the next chapter. Yes, Aaron.
Okay. Let's say you put something, credit card, whatever, in your shoe, and it's permissible, but you can't move it. So then when you take off your shoe before you go to bed, it's moving in the shoe.
And I know we have to see this again. We have to explore. I mean, there's ways of positioning it that it shouldn't, but we have to see this. I have to. It was at a kiddush. It was a bad timing to discuss the law, to get a clarity. But we have to see this a little further. We have to explore this further.
But let me just ask you this: very simply, we have an Aruch here in Brooklyn, and
an Eruv, just have to say something cut in. An Eruv is about carrying.
Right. I don't, just personally me, I don't carry anything I don't need for Shabbos. So when I take my stuff to shul, it's my talit and my prayer book. It's not, even if I could carry it, because it's a permissible item, I don't need it, so I don't take it, because you try to do the best you can and take it.
Yeah, that's different. But here we're not talking about carrying in a public domain, private domain, or crossing in from a public domain to private domain, or carrying 4 amas, in public. Here we're talking about the question of allowed to touch something. Touching something that's another question. So here he says, that if something falls on it, so you could shake it off or you can move klach yad, but you can't do it if it's for the sake of the money itself, right? And he says also that if you put it there before Shabbos with intention, if it's staying there, so now the vessel that's holding it becomes a basis, a davar aser. It means a recept becomes a support for something that's prohibited. You put it there intentionally. So that's different than forgetting something or something falling somewhere, or if you forgot your money there, you didn't want it to be there. It means there's a difference between your money. Yeah, everyone puts their wallet in their pants on purpose, and it should be there. But the fact that it's there now is by mistake. You didn't want it there. You made a mistake. You wanted to wear the pants on Shabbos, and you forgot that you had your wallet there, or you forgot that you put change in your pocket. So there was no kavanah. There was no like setting up the system that it should be that way. Hold on, Aaron. But so therefore, he says in that case, you're allowed to shake out your pants, but not shaking out your pants if you're doing it for the sake of the money, only if you need the pants. Yes, Aaron.
So you didn't intend to wear the raincoat, and you didn't know, or they were saying it wasn't going to rain, and then it rains, and you need your raincoat, but you left all your stuff in there because you used it during the work week. So what do you do then? Are you allowed?
Yeah, you shake it out.
So you can just shake it, but it has to fall wherever it may fall.
Yeah, and then you could like kind of kick it away, but it tilted klachia. We're gonna let's the footnote number 55 is a very important footnote. So let's first see that, because there's two things over here. There's carrying something directly in an indirect way, and there's moving something via something else. It's not the same thing. Yes, Rebecca.
I don't know if this is off the topic, but so my candlesticks are on the windowsill next to my table. So let's say I want to lift up something else that I left on the windowsill before Shabbos. Like, is the whole does that become muktzeh because it's on the
No.
same windowsill as the table as the candles?
No, we just said that something that permissible is on, even if it's on top of something that's prohibited. Here you're talking about something that's on something that's on something. That's different. That's for sure not even a problem. But we said even if something's permissible on top of something that's prohibited, you're allowed to take it off. We
But
just said.
because isn't there an issue like if you need to put like challah or something on the table before
That's if you,
Shabbos because otherwise,
that's if you want to move the table with the candelabra on it.
but
That
why would you?
that we're going to learn that in the next chapter. The next
So
chapter
then,
is let's say
so yeah.
let's say you have the candelabra on the table, right? And
Mhm.
there's nothing, and it goes into Shabbos, and it only supports the candelabra. It's not a joint support of something that's for Shabbos. Because then you could say it's just like it's supporting the candelabra, it's supporting the chalas, right? So that's why people put the chalas on before the candelabra, but that's not really so. The question is, when it goes into Shabbos, is it only supporting the muktzeh, or is it also supporting something of a mitzvah, right? So here, then you want to move your table. So then, if it's only a support for the candelabra, then the issue could be that now the table becomes a support to the candelabra. So in here, the table itself becomes muktzeh to move the table. But if you have something that's on the tray of the candelabra and you want to take off that thing, you're not moving the candelabra. Even if it says it's going to move a little bit, but you're actually pulling off the permissible thing. So that's different than carrying, so to say, the table with the candelabra on it. It's not the same thing.
So do you have to do you have to set the table before Shabbos for that reason?
Some people will put the chalas on. We'll learn in next chapter we deal with that issue.
Because if you keep your challahs warm until you serve them, then you wouldn't be putting them on the table before Shabbos.
Okay, to have your candles on the table on Shabbos is not a problem. Doesn't mean you're not allowed to eat on the table. The question is if you want to move the table.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So here, okay. So again, let's just look at law number 13 again. Tiltal, handling kal yad in an unusual manner is permitted with muktzeh. Therefore, if you forget something muktzeh on something or fell onto something on Shabbos, and you need that something that it's on or fell on, or you needed space, you could shake it off. Linar, you can shake it off, or to carry what you need and throw it off then. Same thing if you left money in your pants, you could shake out your pants if you need the pants. But for the muktzeh itself, right, you can't shake it off for the muktzeh itself. That's talking, so that's it's prohibited to do so. Now let's see how footnote 55 breaks up this law. He says the paragraph begins the discussion of tiltul klach yad. You're going to carry it in it's holding the muktzeh itself in an unusual way. It means usually you hold something with your hand. Let's say you kind of move it with your elbow or your foot. That's not usual, right? Whereas the example are tiltul idea davracha, indirect handling, not the same thing, right? You have indirect handling where if you're holding your pants, you're holding them in a normal way, but it's indirect because you're not holding the money, you're holding the pants. And then you're shaking the pants out and the money falls out. So that there's handling in an unusual way, which is the actual tiltul is not regular, using your elbow or foot. And then there's indirect, which is using the permissible that's carrying the prohibited, right? So he says, what is the law flow like that? Because it's seemingly mixing two different ideas. So again, the paragraph begins in the discussion of tiltul klach yad, unusual handling of the Muktzeh article itself, whereas the example of shaking something out are tiltul ayidei davracher, indirect handling it. In which case, handling the Muktzeh for its own benefit, in other words, if that it not be stolen or damaged, is not permitted. The author seems to agree with this later opinion. See Magen Avram 309 and Shar Hatzion. So he doesn't. There's a little bit. It would have been this footnote could have been written a little better because he's kind of not giving us the full picture. But from what we could understand from the footnote, what the footnote is saying is that seemingly to move your phone that's lying there with your elbow or foot for the sake of the phone, that's permissible. To shake your phone out for the sake of the phone, that's prohibited. Means to shake out the money for the money, that's prohibited. To shake out the money for the pants is permitted. But that's you're carrying everything normally. You're just not carrying it directly, not touching the money, touching the pants, and you're shaking out the pants. So that's what he's saying. That it seems that, I mean, again, it seems from this footnote, what he means to be saying is that to move something in an unusual way, you're allowed to do it for the sake of the phone itself, for the prohibited, for the muktzeh itself. To handle in an indirect handling, which means you're holding it regularly, but not touching it directly, but holding the pants or holding the plate and pulling off whatever it is that's muktzeh. That's the different scenario. That you have to do it for the plate, you can't do it for the muktzeh. Okay, so there again, the footnote could have had a few more words to clarify that, but it seems that's what he's saying. Okay, footnote number, is there a 56 here? No, 56 is next up. Okay. So let's leave it as understanding it that way. This is an important law again. So if you have something that's muktzeh, seemingly what he says in the footnote is like this: if you have something muktzeh and you want to move it in a non-regular way, like your foot is non-regular, you don't move things with your feet, for the sake of the muktzeh itself is permitted. To shake something off that's using your regular hands, but you're not touching directly the muktzeh, that you can only do for the thing if you need the thing itself, not for the sake of the muktzeh. And now he continues, law number 14. Again, in the case where you want to shake the pants out for the sake of the pants, but let's say you don't need the pants. You want to shake out the money for the money. Also, you can't carry something that has muktzeh on it if you don't need the thing that you're carrying. He says, therefore, you're not allowed to carry you're not allowed to carry a child in your hands, even in a private domain. I mean, it's not a question of carrying something in a public domain. If he's holding something that is muktzeh, if the child is holding something that's muktzeh, you have to see we have to understand that law in a second. Why? Because the question over here is, this law is a little complicated. Why? Because he starts off the law saying that to carry, you have to need the vessel itself. Means, let's say again, you have a plate with something that's left or fell on the plate, and you need the plate. So you want to kind of just shake off whatever is prohibited, that's okay, because you need the plate. But if you want to shake off the prohibited because for the sake of the prohibited, it's not. Here, you're carrying the child. The child is holding a rock, right? Has in his hand a rock. So seemingly, you're not holding the child so that you could carry the rock. You're holding the child for the sake of the child. Why is that not considered to be carrying the keli for the keli itself? So seemingly because it's the child's not a keli, and now the child is holding the rock itself, so you're kind of carrying the rock. You don't have anything that you want that's there, and the child doesn't count, evidently. So im yesh biyadi even a shar davar muktzeh, you can't carry a child. So that happens all the time. You have children that are holding muktzeh. You can't stop your children from holding something muktzeh. If your child is holding something muktzeh, you can't carry the child. So says the Kitzur. Ach, im yesh latinik gaguim she'im lo yitlano yechla. If the child is going to get into hysteria because he wants to be held, you can't kind of tell him to throw off the stone. If they yitzak v'yivka, because the kid's going to start carrying on and crying and throwing a temper tantrum, is azmut a little yadav b'rshus hayachid. So then, in a private domain where you're not carrying the stone, in a public domain, so then you could carry the child. But if he has a coin in his hand, and then the concern is that maybe if he drops the coin, you're going to pick it up because it's a coin, it's valuable. Also, you can't even hold his hand, and he's walking on his own feet. Even in a private domain. Even if the child is crying. Because we're concerned, maybe the coin will fall down from the child's hand. Because you're just going to be, it's a tumult, and you're going to forget. Let's say it's not a coin, right? Not a penny. Let's say he's holding $100 bill, right? So you may pick it up. And then you're carrying the muktzeh itself. And then here the Kitzur holds the opinion that even if the child is going to get sick from the fact that you're not holding his hand, you can't hold his hand while he's holding the money. It's not the kid can get kind of sick, but he's not going to die, God forbid. He may just get really overwhelmed. Okay, this is a very harsh law, and meaning to say there's a lot of details in this law, which is again, this is the short code of the Jewish law. It's called Kitzur. It's not that this law gets discussed in much more detail in the actual Shulchan Aruch. Let's see, and for some reason there's limited amount of footnotes here. Let's see what footnote number 56 is. I just want to see it in the English a second. Hold on. The author's ruling, he says in 56, the author's ruling is based on the first opinion in Shulchan Aruch 3091. However, Bir halacha, citing Eliyahu Rabbah, rules that where the illness may result, you may rely on the second opinion and hold the child's hand. So, although the Kitzur is more strict, there's other opinions that disagree that if the child is going to get emotionally worked up, but you're not holding his hand, even if he's holding money, you're allowed to. I want to see, here's the Shulchan Aruch itself. This is the Alter Rebbe's 309 on this question. Let's see this law a little bit in detail because it seems to be a bit puzzling. So the Alter Rebbe says in Shin Tes like this. Noitel Adam es benoi, he says it the other way around. You could take your child, Birshus Yachid in a private domain, Ve'evin biyadi, even if he has a stone in his hand, which is the opposite of how we learned it in the Kitzur. But it's not as if you're carrying the stone itself. That's only if that's the only way the child, you have to do it. The child is very attached to you and wants you to hold him. He'll get sick if you don't hold him. And it's not called carrying something not with your hand, which is indirect carrying, if it's a situation where the child can get sick. And also, the child won't let you throw the stone out because he will cry. Okay, so this is the law that we just learned backwards. The Kitzur says you can't carry your child unless the child is crying. The Alter Rebbe says you could carry the child if he's crying, unless he's not crying. Right. So the question is how you word it, the positive before the negative. The question that we had was, in our simple understanding of the law, that to carry the plate for the plate you're allowed to, and shake off the stone. You're carrying klachiyad. You're not carrying. It's indirect carrying. Here, you're carrying the child. You're not looking to hold the stone. But there's two things. One is the place that you're allowed to carry if you remember the wording over here in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he says like this. He's not saying this. There could be another problem. The other problem would be that when are you allowed to carry a plate? If you need the plate and you have something that's muktzeh on it, is in a case where you need to use you're planning to shake off the muktzeh and use the plate. Over here, you're carrying the child's still holding the stone. So that's another difference in the case. But he doesn't say that. He says the problem is over here is that it's not considered of carrying the permissible item for its own sake. It's carrying almost like directly carrying the prohibited item, meaning to say that holding the child is not considered like holding a plate, even though the child you don't care about the stone. As far as you're concerned, you wouldn't mind if the kid threw the stone down. You're not looking to move the stone. You're looking to move the child in your house. So why is that any different than holding the rock? You could say because the child's still holding the rock. In the case of the plate, he's pulling. You're trying to shake it off. But that's not what he defines it as. So let's just see again quickly if we have any more information from the actual text of the law. Footnote number. So far we don't have any more information from the actual text. But let's see what it says over here in footnote number 1. So he says like this. This leniency, let's say, this is a big question. You're in a place of a area without an Erev. Can you carry your child? Now, carrying a child is a question if you carry in public domain. Can you do it if the child is holding something that's prohibited on Shabbos? It says this leniency is not granted in public domain, where in addition to the prohibition against Muktzeh, there's also the possibility that the person will carry his son and the stone more than 4 cubits in a public domain. So that creates another problem. Similarly, picking up the child is forbidden in a carmelis, even if it's not an actual public domain. Okay, we still didn't get to the issue of what's wrong with holding the child that has a stone on it. You're holding the child. Why is it different than this plate? Yes, Rebecca.
I didn't catch what you just said. So can you carry a child outside of an eruv, I don't know, for a while?
Okay, that's a separate question of a chaynaisis atzmai. The ruling is that a live person carries themselves, and that's why holding someone who's alive is much lighter than holding someone that is passed away. You ever heard the expression dead weight?
Yeah.
So dead weight
Dead
is
people are heavier than live
why?
people.
Because halacha says that chay noises atzmai, a person who's alive is carrying themselves. So even when you're carrying them, you're not really carrying them. So there's the opinion that you could carry a child without anything else in a public domain. And here the problem is that there's two issues. One issue is that the kid is carrying something, so then with it you're carrying the stone. And the second issue is the stone itself is muktzeh. So if the kid is going to be hysterical, so then you could carry the kid in a private domain even though he's holding the stone. The question we're trying to kind of understand over here is that so far in the Alter Rebbe, you could say that fine, holding this child is not like holding a keli. Holding a child is almost like an extension of yourself. It's almost like you're holding the stone. So even though it can be considered klachiyad, it could be considered adavar atzmai, but you're definitely if you have your child, right? Say, you know what? Take the phone, and I'm going to pick you up, and I'm going to move you to the bedroom, and then drop the phone. That obviously is a problem, because then you're using the child to move something. But let's say the child's holding something that's muktzeh, and you're carrying the child. Why is that different than holding the plate? But we didn't get to that explanation yet. Yes, Aaron.
Okay, let's say he picks up in your house one of his toys that for some reason he got into the toy box that you closed, and he picks up something that has a light on it that could turn on when you shake it. So now you want to put him down for a nap, and he's holding this thing. And even if you don't want to put him for a nap, can you take it out of his hand, just and drop it so that he's not violating Shabbos? And can you take him, if he won't give it up, can you take him for a nap into his bed, carry him?
Okay, so that's the question. So this is exactly what we're talking about. If if a kid is holding on to something he doesn't want to drop, so if the kid is emotionally attached, then he says you could carry the child. If the kid is okay, just to pick up the child is not allowed. Means who she efshar bin yunacher. This is the line over here. The line is that who she efshar bin yunacher. In the Kitzur, it starts the other way around. The first says you're not allowed unless the child is going to be hysterical. The Alter Rebbe says you're allowed if this is the only way. So right, so it's just a question of how. It's not just a question of wording. It's also a mindset. Means the Kitzur is being more strict, the Alter Rebbe is being a little more lenient, even though technically the it's not different than the actual ruling. But it's how you're looking at it. So right? You can take your kid in a private domain if that's the only way you can move him, right? So here he says in footnote number 3 that here he explains a bit our question. In other words, ordinary is forbidden to move an article that is muktzeh by moving a permitted article as well as will be explained in subsection 6. We'll see that in a second. Again, that's if you're looking to carry the muktzeh thing, right? We said before, you can't carry a plate that holds something muktzeh so that you could move the muktzeh. You need to be holding the plate for the sake of the plate and trying to shake off the muktzeh. The question is, how does it work with the child? It's kind of complicated. So he says, so far, he says what we know so far. In this instance, meaning with holding the child, special the suspension is granted, as the Alter Rebbe proceeds to explain, because the kid is going to be hysterical. The question is, it still hasn't answered that question. You're not you're not holding the stone. You're not moving the stone. You're moving the child. So obviously, holding a child is not like holding a plate. That's obviously what we have to come to the conclusion. Let's see number 6. Where is that? Over here. No. So what did you say? What's subsection 6? What does he mean by subsection 6? It means law. It means halacha is vav. Yeah, some reason or another. So the subsection 6 is that if there was a stone on top of the barrel and you need the barrel for the wine, so then you could like we learned before, you could turn the barrel so the stone should fall off, and then it makes it usable. But that again, so here we're talking about we have kind of 3 cases. We have regular kalim, and you have a child. Evidently, the child hasn't. We have to maybe examine a little more why there's not a clarity to explain. Because in our law over here, he kind of just, again, this is the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he kind of just glides into the question, saying that you can hold a plate if you need the plate, but you can't hold a keli if you need for the sake of the muktzeh, and for example, holding a child. So I think what happens over here is that the child kind of is irrelevant, and you're just holding the stone. It's not like you're holding the child, which is like holding a plate, which is holding a stone, because then you're not looking, there's no intention to move. Again, if you're holding a child, so the child should move something muktzeh, that for sure is no questionable, that's prohibited. But if the kid is holding a stone and you're just holding the child who's holding a stone, so why is that any different than holding a plate? So you can say either because he's holding it all the time, or you could say that's not really holding a child is not like holding a plate. It's almost like indirectly holding the stone, and we don't look at the child. We're only looking at the stone, and you're indirectly holding the stone, and that's prohibited on Shabbos. Yes, Aaron.
So I see this in Brooklyn. I know a few people who do this. They say the kid's under bar mitzvah age, so they say you carry back. They don't believe in a roof. Some people don't, and they don't want to carry, but they say you're under bar mitzvah, so you can carry. Is that permissible?
Well, I guess you have to just see the wording of it. It's not exactly as you're seeing it, meaning you're saying that if you don't hold by the Erev, so then it's like a public domain. But he's saying that I personally won't carry in the Erev, but because there's an Erev, therefore I let my kid carry. But would he let his kid carry in an actual public domain that has no Erev is different, you understand?
I
Means
don't know about that.
when he says I don't hold by the Erev, meaning that you're being strict on the Erev. The Erev, no one's questioning if the Erev
All
is
right, so
halal
let me just
kosher.
clarify this for real quick. Some Sephardic, or a lot of Sephardics, do not claim there's an eruv because you can. I studied it for like 2 days in a row, so with a rabbi, but there's reasons for it. So they don't believe in the eruv exists, and they don't believe it's legit, and they'll still give their kid under 13 something to carry. It's not electronic or anything, but if you believed in the eruv, it's something you could have carried. Okay, but because they don't believe in the eruv, they can't carry anything, and so they say, "But my kid's under 13, so it's allowed."
Yeah, but again, if you're saying that my kid is under 13, therefore he could carry in the Erev, is one statement. If you're saying because my kid is under 13 and therefore he could carry and there is no Erev and it's like carrying a public domain, that's obviously not allowed. But people will maybe not consciously be articulating is that the Erev has a basis to be kosher. I'm being more strict and therefore I'm not keeping it. But for my son who's under 13, so he could rely on the those who hold by the Erev. But if there was no Erev, right?
Right.
Would you allow your child to carry? You'd say no. You're not allowed to. I mean, if the child's carrying it and a little baby, like he says, the Alter Rebbe says, that's something else. You have to depending what he's holding. If you could hold his hand and how hysterical he will get. All those questions are asked about the situation. But if you're talking about your 12-year-old son who's a mature boy and wants to carry something in his pocket, and you say, I let him do it because he's under bar mitzvah, or my daughter under bas mitzvah. So if you're saying is because there's an Erev and therefore they're carrying, is okay. You're saying it because there's an Erev that is acceptable. I personally am being more strict. But if you're saying, I don't think the Erev is kosher, and it's as if you're carrying in a public domain, so then there's no basis to let your kid carry.
Gotcha.
All right. Let's do one more law. Meis asr talta b'Shabbos. A person who passes away, you're not allowed to touch them on Shabbos. You could pull out the pillow from beneath him, that could cause it to soil or that he should decompose. Don't move the person himself. He says if the mouth keeps opening, and you want to close his mouth or her mouth, you can. It's not respectful. You could close his mouth so it shouldn't continue to open, or her mouth. So not to close what's already been open, but that shouldn't keep on falling. Because then you're moving the cheeks, the chin, etc. Okay, let's see footnote number 57. We're going to stop here. He says Shulchan Aruch Rav just quotes the law. Okay. Is there any questions that we have? We have a lot of questions, but are there any specific questions we have? Yes, Aaron.
Okay, so the person has a heart attack in the middle of wherever, not in your house, so on the streets. Are you allowed to pick up the dead? And you know they're dead. They Hatzlah came and pronounced them dead. Are you allowed to move him?
Okay, we're gonna learn exactly. Next law, I'm gonna cover a little bit more, but in theory, you're not allowed to move him now. You would leave him. You could cover him with
But
a
now
sheet.
someone's got to sit with him the whole
Well,
Shabbos. Can't leave him in the
no,
street.
no. Are you talking about if the person's in the street?
No, not where the
House.
cars are. You would move him. That's an emergency. I'm talking about, say, your house and there's no A roof and they had a pass. They died on your grass, so you can't
Okay,
leave them in the grass. Animals will come.
so we're gonna see the laws as there's another law number 16 discusses a little more detail about to what extension does the law stretch in a case of disrespect for the body.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Barbara.
Yeah, I had a quick question when they're talking about the mouth, because being a nurse, I have dealt with this when people have passed away. Now, when it says so that it's already open, so are they referring to like the mouth, the person has died, the mouth is open, it's been open for some time before you close it? Is that what they're referring to?
It's a very good question. I was thinking the same thing as I was saying it myself. Let's just see the English again. If the mouth keeps opening, you may tie the jaw in a way that it opens no further. So it shouldn't, like, there's basically, if you could figure out a way to keep it in a certain status as opposed to just being, moving, I'm not sure how that would keep on moving, but not in a way that you close that which is already open. Means you could keep it to be just stationary, whatever it is, but not to close it more than what it was initially. So I'm not exactly 100% sure the scenario of a person's jaw. Maybe maybe you're on a train or something, right? And there's vibration that moves I don't mean saying, or on a boat. I'm saying there could be situations where there's because the jaw is not. But if you're like just lying in your bed, I'm not exactly certain how
Well, the jaw goes slack,
yeah.
and what we usually do is, we put the person back and, we kind of fix their jaw up there. We put something under their neck, which kind of puts their head back so their jaw stays closed. But it's confusing because it sounds like, if it were to fall open, you're moving the limb again. You're moving the chin up to close it. So it's kind of confusing to me.
Yeah, so I hear what you're saying. That's what I'm saying. If we read it again, it seems like it says if the mouth keeps opening. The word, I think the key word over here is keeps. Means it's not. It just keeps on. There's something. It's not in a situation of stationary, like you're saying, where you position the head and it's not going to move anymore. But it keeps opening. So you may tie the jaw in a way that it opens no further, doesn't continue to open, but not in a way that closes it, which is already open. Means if it's open already, you can't close it on Shabbos.
Okay,
But
you can't force it.
You can kind of position it that it should just be whatever it is, but not the
Okay.
key opening. I'm not sure. Like it seems to me that this is all within fractions of seconds. I mean, if the jaw is let's say falling open, right? Once it's totally open, I'm assuming it would just stay open. It wouldn't close again,
Yeah.
right? I'm assuming. But it could also be if you're on if wherever the person is vibrating, like if you're on a boat or something where it's kind of things are moving, so then the jaw is moving the whole time. That would be
Okay.
the scenario.
Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Laila Tov, good Shabbos, and I wanted to check a little bit more in some of these laws about the child after study it a bit more deeper in the actual text. All right,
Okay.
Laila Tov, everyone, take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Welcome.
Thank you.